Welcome back. I'm here today visiting with Jackie Ammon. She is an attorney with Wilmer Hale. Jackie, welcome to today's show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Jackie, for the listeners, can you give us your background of what brought you up to where you are today?
Sure. So I didn't know really that I wanted to be an attorney when I was in college, just kind of, having fun and studying political science, which is a degree that can go a lot of directions. And my junior year, I did an internship in the Speaker's office in Congress in Washington, D.C., and all the staff are lawyers. And I loved it so much, I realized if I want to be anywhere near this, I need to become a lawyer. And so that was kind of the drive the rest of my junior and senior year in college. Fast forward, go to law school in San Francisco and realize that not just kind of Congress, government, but I just loved working with people and found that corporate law was really going to be a passion of mine because of the ability to work with clients so directly. And as a result, got a job at Wilmer Hale and I'm now practicing corporate law in Silicon Valley.
It must be exciting in Silicon Valley with the how much alive it is with new innovations and new companies. And as you're doing corporate transactions, is there a particular type of company that you enjoy working on more?
Yeah, so my favorite companies are actually the ones that I get before they've done anything. It's the quintessential two guys in a garage, coding and coming up with an idea. And I really love those companies because I get to grow with them. You see them when it's just an idea and you watch them turn into a company that's creating jobs and potentially saving lives or changing the world in some way with their technology. And those are really my favorite kinds because, a lot of the issues that they encounter are novel. And so they're not only novel to the client, but to me. And so getting to work through those together is really fun.
So when a client comes to you, how do they usually find you?
It's a great question. The Valley's small, even though it's big. So, a lot of times it's through clients I've already had, referring. Sometimes people just Google search lawyers. I mean, as silly as that sounds. But, our firm has a good reputation for being able to help with a lot of different areas, right? You're having IP issues, you want to file a patent, we can help with that. If you're having regulatory issues, I have a client that is working through some FAA regulations, which just seems a little unusual for a tech company because they're obviously not an airline. But, we can help with the regulatory issues as well. And then I kind of feel as the corporate attorney that I'm the quarterback. So, I'm helping the business grow and helping with corporate governance, but I also get to be a part of all of those other aspects that we're helping with on the legal front.
Now, Wilmer Hale, they have multiple locations across the U.S.? Or?
Yes. So we have two big offices in Boston and D.C. Probably our second biggest office is our Palo Alto office. We have one in Los Angeles and then one in Denver. So I'm hoping to make my way out to Denver soon and work from out there.
Oh, my goodness. and so then in the Silicon Valley office, how big is the office there?
It's about 90 attorneys.
Okay.
Which is pretty large. We're not one of the biggest in the Valley. That's because we're based out of the East Coast. But, I like to think of our Palo Alto office as the small office feel with the big office resources. And so you can get to know your attorney really well, have a lot of one-on-one time if you want it. But we have the resources that, a multinational 1,000-person, 1,000 attorney firm has.
That's important for today's business environment for companies that want to scale.
I think so. I mean, when you're kind of going back to what I was saying before about, being able to start with people from the beginning, a lot of those people need a lot of handholding in a good way, right? You don't know anything about running a business. You know a lot about the substance of your technology or what, you're doing. But, I get to really teach people how to run a business. It's not just necessarily, how are you going to structure this legally? Is it going to be an LLC? Is it going to be a corporation? Who's going to be on the board? Who are going to be the officers? How are we going to run a board meeting? That's all part of it, and that's legal. But a lot of it's, how do you fire somebody? I had to help a team fire a CEO about a month ago. That's not really legal. That's business. And so we get to do it all.
Those little companies, you have to be the jack of all trades and, in knowing how to advise clients as you go through their growth spurts.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jackie, I need to take a quick break. And After the break, when we come back, I want to talk about what's new in structuring of companies in the industry today. So I'm visiting here with Jackie Ammon. She's an attorney with Wilmer & Hale, and we'll be right back after these messages. Since you can't take your wealth with you, spend time with your family. Welcome back. I'm visiting here today with Jackie Ammon. She is an attorney with Wilmer Hale. And Jackie, before the break, we talked about your background of why you got into corporate law and the types of companies that you work with. And I want to just start off with two entrepreneurs come to you. They have a company that they want to form. And how would you advise them in terms of how do they select the entities? What are their options there? And, how do they get things going off the ground?
Yeah. So usually the first question is, do you want to be venture backed? Are you trying to raise money from third parties, or are you going to build up with your own revenue? And that's really, as you know, it's tax driven, and that's really what drives the question. If you're looking to raise money from a VC or some kind of angel investor, you really need the corporate structure, primarily because entities can't invest via an LLC. If you're going to be a small company kind of grinding on your own initially, and you want to be able to take the losses and gains on your personal tax return, then the LLC is going to be the way to go. I don't usually advise startups, the two boys in the garage coding, to go the partnership route, especially later on. The liability concerns make a corporate structure or an LLC a more viable option. And what I mean by that when I say liability is, let's say your product hurts somebody, you don't want your personal assets to be on the line. So a corporate structure, a corporate form will protect the founders from personal liability.
In today's world, I guess as things evolve, we see a lot of different structures going place. And, so people have the opportunity, again, just reviewing a partnership, sole proprietorship, they go to the corporation, and in the deal structure, typically a lot of companies that want to grow, the entrepreneurs usually, they got the ideas, but they don't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's the right time for them to start coming in and entertaining? Should I be taking funds early on? Should I wait a little bit? How would you advise them as the attorney?
So there are a couple of ways to raise money. I wouldn't, unless you can find quote unquote good money, early on, you don't really want to give too much equity away in your company, right? You're building this thing from scratch. You want to hold on to as much of it as you can, as long as you can. So usually we advise clients to do some kind of convertible debt, and that you can just raise, a couple $1,000s at a time, friends and family, really easy. Well, easier than, your equity financing. And that's usually the route that I recommend startups take early on. A lot of times you can, bootstrap. You don't need a lot of money. If you're just two guys in a garage coding, as long as you have your computers, you can probably get pretty far without too much funding, as long as you're okay, eating bread for dinner and living in your garage. But, I think the convertible debt is a good way to raise money if you have people who are willing to put a little in and take the risk.
So, Jackie, what's the risk of the person who, you got the new technology out there in the CPA world, the TurboTax and Quicken, and in the law world, LegalZoom and these do-it-yourself. What's the risk of a person saying, let me just bootstrap and do everything myself and just go online? What's their downside?
I think the downside, and I have a lot of clients who come in who have used LegalZoom, and it's not that you can't do that, but no company is one size fits all, right? Everybody has a different story, and LegalZoom and those kind of products that are available are really pigeonholing every company into one kind of company, right? So for instance, when you're a corporation, you file your charter publicly in Delaware. And so you might have things in there that, LegalZoom just adds that you don't actually want to be public. And that's something an attorney can advise you on early on that you might not even think about or realize. A lot of people worry about the cost of an attorney early on, and I can totally understand that. And what I would say to that is a lot of the firms in the Valley understand that. When you work with emerging companies, you understand that they can't afford, thousands and thousands of dollars of legal fees early on. And so I would encourage entrepreneurs to negotiate with their attorneys. People are flexible. They want to get paid. Everybody's running a business, but, people are flexible. They understand, and they'll try and work with you. So you shouldn't be afraid to engage an attorney just because of the legal fees, because frankly, it's going to be more expensive to clean up the mess later than it would be to just do it right the first time.
That's great advice. I'm visiting here today with Jackie Ammon. She's a attorney with Wilmer Hale. Jackie, I need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
I love fishing, with my family.
I think it would be easier to use a net.
It was so much fun.
The times when we are together, it makes it all the more worth it.
Having Dad teach them how to cast a fly rod, and
as long as we're doing stuff together, we're having fun.
Some people see a father and a son fishing together, while others see a succession plan. Welcome back. I'm visiting here today with Jackie Ammon. She's an attorney with Wilmer Hale. And Jackie, before the break, we talked about your specialization as a corporate attorney, helping companies with their deal structure, putting things together. But when clients come to you, if I could just ask the question, what are some of the misconceptions or how people are misdirected when it comes to thinking about how an attorney can help them?
Sure. So I think there's 3 common issues that I see with clients coming in at an early stage. The first is that everybody's going to get along. And by that, I mean that all the founder, we don't have to do a lot of paperwork. We don't have to lock everything up because we're all friends and we're going to remain friends through this whole process. And, the lawyers are around to say that might not be the case. And I see it happen all the time where a founding team comes in, they think everything's going to be great. They don't want to sign paperwork to protect IP or things like that. And next thing you know, 6 months later, someone leaves the company, has a huge stake of equity, and there's not a ton we can do because we didn't, the company didn't want to correct the paperwork at the time. So I think, there's nothing wrong with admitting that things might go sour or people might decide to part ways. So it doesn't have to be a scary conversation. It just has to be a realistic one. So that's something the attorney can help with. And I think that's pitfall number 1. Pitfall number 2, which is somewhat related, is not getting everybody to assign their IP to the company. For a lot of these technology companies, intellectual property is their asset. That is the value besides the people. So if everyone's not giving their IP, assigning the IP to the company, when it comes time to get financed or sell the company, you run into the problem of, does this company actually own the assets it purports to own? And so that's something the attorneys, again, can help with at the outset, but everybody who's doing anything at any kind of technology company should be signing intellectual property assignment agreements. And then the third, I think, is, not taking care of your books and tax issues. We've talked about this before, but in my opinion, business law is highly driven by tax law. And, you need to have clean books. You need to have clean records. And so, engaging a bookkeeper or an accountant early who can help you with those issues. And, QuickBooks can be great, but again, you need somebody with the expertise because not everything is one size fits all. And you want to make sure that you're doing it right at the beginning so you don't have to spend the time and money cleaning it up later.
That's good advice. And I'll add to that it's probably what you see is the more a person's organized and upfront getting started on the right foundation platform, the easier it is for them later on.
Yeah, I would think so. When I talk to entrepreneurs, I like to say, it's like Hansel and Gretel, follow the breadcrumbs, right? When an investor wants to come in and invest in you, they're going to want to take a look at your entire corporate record. And you want to make it really easy for them to follow the breadcrumbs of how you got from point A to point B to point C to now where you are getting invested. And if your books aren't clean, if your paperwork's not clean, if it's hard to follow, if you're doing things that are, out of the ordinary for Silicon Valley, you're just going to make it harder for yourself down the road.
Jackie, there's a lot of companies that seem to be incorporating in states like Delaware, but they're doing business here. Why?
It's a great question. So you actually can incorporate in any state in the country and be what's called domiciled there, and then do business in any other state. And so we actually recommend that all of our clients incorporate in Delaware. Delaware makes its money. It's a small state, and maybe a lot of people can't even point to it on a map, but they've really made their name by being incredibly business friendly, being incredibly efficient, working with the businesses to get things done. And that business friendly attitude makes them a great place for a company to incorporate cheaply and efficiently. And then if you're doing business in a state like, say, California, where we are, we can qualify you as a foreign entity here so that you're also doing business in California, but your primary, corporate issues are going to be handled in Delaware.
Now, there's a trick to getting a Delaware company set up, and it has to do with the number of shares. Can you maybe cover that? So we recommend that our clients authorize about 10 million shares. That's a magic number for a couple of reasons, but primarily it keeps the taxes, the franchise taxes, low in Delaware. It's kind of a sweet spot number. It's also, from a corporate perspective, when you're issuing equity, a really high number so that you don't have to go back and amend your charter a bunch of times to have equity in order to be issuing it out to various founders, or if you want to, take on an investor who wants stock. So franchise tax, again, everything's tax driven, right? And we find that 10 million is the magic number. I think most law firms in Silicon Valley would agree. Now, there's also something with securities law where Delaware ends up being a little bit more favorable with their security.
Yes, I think so. So Delaware's courts actually are split into two, and the Court of Chancery handles most corporate matters. And again, talking about being efficient and quick, this court sees all sorts of cases. They are well versed in corporate law in Delaware and federal securities laws as applicable. And so, if you were to engage in shareholder litigation or something down the road, or you have securities laws issues, the Court of Chancery can help smooth the process as much as possible. I mean, still a court, you still have to litigate, it's still expensive, but I think overall Delaware is really the place you want to be. There's some word recently about Nevada trying to be Delaware Part 2. If companies want to incorporate in Nevada, I usually say we can do that. Delaware is probably better right now, but if Nevada keeps moving forward and trying to imitate Delaware and being business friendly, I think that might also end up being a good spot and maybe a little bit closer for the California companies.
Now, in the world today, the world's getting a lot smaller with technology. A lot of people are doing business across the border. Any particular thing they need to know if they're going into, let's just take a country like Canada.
Yeah, so, a couple of things. One is to know that you just are going to have to do business a little differently there. When you're moving into a different country, you should get local counsel, you should get local tax advice, because everything's going to be a little bit different. We can help to a certain extent, but having local counsel on the ground who knows what's going on is priority number one. I think another thing that, and this varies across states as well, but in addition to going international, the HR issues are really important. Countries treat employees a certain way. They have different visions about how employees should be treated. And so just because they do it one way in California doesn't mean they do it that way in Pennsylvania. And it certainly doesn't mean that they do it that way in, England or Canada or China. And so when you're going to have employees move internationally, or you're going to hire people internationally, you really need to be cognizant of the issues that might arise. And I think that's where most companies land into trouble. We're pretty well versed in getting funds internationally, right? If you want to raise money from an investor overseas, that's a little easier. But things like HR, things like hiring employees, things like taxes, that's stuff that you really need to get local advice on to make sure that you're doing it right and that you're in compliance with the jurisdiction that you're in.
Jackie, for any of the listeners that would like to reach out and contact you, how do they do so?
So you can go to the WilmerHale website, just Google WilmerHale and search my name, Jackie Ammon, and you can find me on there. All my V-card information is on the website.
I've been visiting here today with Jackie Ammon. She's an attorney with WilmerHale. Jackie, thanks for being on today's show.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back after these messages.